Hello, and welcome to this photo-segmented video on how to reassemble a CTM valve assembly. For the purpose of this video, we will be assembling the air mix pressure valve. The low-pressure air spray and high-pressure airless valves are virtually the same, with the needle and air cylinder with spring being different. In this video, we will be assembling a valve from the injector valve assembly. And it is the same style valves that come in the CTM block assemblies, as shown here. The tools needed for this valve reassembly are shown here. You will need a Samez gun wrench, a large flat blade screwdriver, a 4mm Allen wrench, a 13mm and 6mm open-end box wrench, along with an 8mm socket wrench with extension. There will be 4 specific parts needed for this rebuild: the air cylinder piston seal, the air mix needle tip, the air mix fluid cartridge assembly, and the indicator rod and cylinder insert. There will be lubricating grease, Magnalube, used along with 2 versions of Loctite, blue for medium strength and red for high strength applications. We do recommend a strong pair of rubberized gloves to assist in the assembly process. The first step in the rebuild process will begin with the air cylinder. We will need to thread in the indicator rod insert into the cylinder housing. For this, we will need the red high strength Loctite, pictured here. Apply a small droplet of glue onto the insert threads, as shown in this picture. Once the adhesive is applied, you will need the 8mm socketed wrench along with the extension to thread and tighten the insert into the cylinder body. Be careful not to over tighten, as the threads are thin and can stretch and strip. Just tighten to a snug fit. Next will be the assembly of the indicator rod to the intermediate brass bushing. Again, we will need to use the red high-strength Loctite. Place a small droplet of adhesive onto the threads of the rod. Then thread into the male threaded portion of the bushing. This is where rubber gloves will assist in threading the 2 parts together. Tighten until both parts bottom out and no threads are showing from the rod. Moving on to the cartridge assembly. To install the needle tip, we will use the medium strength blue Loctite. With the rod side that has a small decrease in size just before the threads, place a small amount of adhesive onto the threads, as shown here. Now, while using the rubber gloves, thread the tip onto the rod. Screw it down until it bottoms out and no threads show. Then use a rag to remove any excess adhesive from the rod. Next is the air piston assembly. The high-strength red Loctite will be used to secure the nut to the piston. The assembly will consist of the seal, a support ring, and the piston body, secured by the fastening nut. First, place the cylinder seal onto the piston body, followed by the brass support ring. Once fitted and seated completely, the nut will be fitted to secure. To secure the nut to the piston, you will need the Samez gun wrench and the 13mm open end wrench. Place a small droplet on the piston body threads as shown. Then place the nut on the threads and begin to tighten by hand. Now place the open slot nearest the hexagonal cutout of the wrench onto the nut. Then using the 13mm wrench, place on the flats of the piston body and tighten down securely. Now to put the indicator rod assembly onto the cartridge assembly. This will use the high strength red Loctite. You will put a small amount onto the threads as shown. Again using the rubber gloves, thread the brass bushing onto the cartridge rod. Tighten until the parts bottom out. We will now insert the full cartridge assembly through the valve base. The cartridge comes with 2 sealing O-rings as part of the assembly. For this process, we will use the lubricating grease. Begin by placing grease on the upper O-ring land of the cartridge and the O-ring itself, as so. Then grease the underside of the cartridge port on the valve base using a Q-tip applicator. Insert the cartridge assembly into the base port from the underside, as shown. Be careful to insert straight through, as cocking to one side or the other may cause the upper O-ring not to seat. To secure the air piston assembly to the cartridge assembly, we will need the 13 and 6mm wrenches, along with the high-strength red Loctite, using just a small amount on the bushing threads as shown. Begin threading the piston onto the male threads of the brass bushing by hand. Once the piston is snugged down, use the 6mm wrench on the flats of the brass bushing and the 13mm wrench on the flats of the piston body. Tighten securely, but do not over-tighten. Now to begin the final steps of the assembly, we must use grease to lube the threads of the base and cylinder seals. After well lubricated, take a large blade screwdriver and apply lube to the blade. Now take the blade and apply it to the edge of the seal and softly press, then turn down the edge of the seal, working all the way around the piston assembly. This will make it easier for insertion into the cylinder housing. The last portion of the assembly will be to install the valve back into the ejector body, or if using a CTM assembly body. For this aspect of the reassembly, we will need a table vise to secure the injector body. Place the injector body housing into the vise, using a rag to secure without the chance of damaging. Using the lubricant, grease the internal cartridge port of the body. Lubricate the second cartridge O-ring and secure it to the bottom land of the cartridge. Be sure to apply a liberal amount of grease to the lower portion of the cartridge. Then insert into the injector body. Once the valve assembly is inserted, use the 4mm Allen wrench to secure the valve assembly to the injector body. Remember to use the crisscross method when tightening. To begin the finalization of the reassembly, we will apply the cylinder housing and spring to the mounted valve assembly. Thoroughly apply lubricant to the inside walls of the cylinder housing, as shown. Next, lubricate the spring, then place on top of the assembly, as so. Now place the cylinder over the top of the spring and valve assembly. Using the rubber gloves, grab a hold of the cylinder and press down while turning clockwise. Catch the threads and continue to tighten. This will be quite difficult. Using the gloves should make this a little easier. Try to keep as straight as possible while tightening. If not, the cylinder may cross thread. So, this completes this CTM valve reassembly video. We strongly suggest that every CTM valve assembly that is rebuilt be actuated and tested with fluid to assure correct functioning before installing into any production process. Thank you for joining, and as always, let's enjoy being the best together.